Welcome everyone to our reflection on Sunday's Gospel. This is taken from the Gospel of Mark. Jesus took Peter, James, and John and led them up a high mountain apart by themselves. And he was transfigured before them. And his clothes became dazzling white, such as no fuller on earth could bleach them. Then Elijah appeared to them along with Moses, and they were conversing with Jesus. Then Peter said to Jesus in reply, "Rabbi, it is good that we are here. Let us build 3 tents, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." He hardly knew what to say. They were so terrified. Then a cloud came, casting a shadow over them, and from the cloud came a voice. "You are my beloved Son. Listen to him." Suddenly, looking around, they no longer saw anyone but Jesus alone with them. As they were coming down the mountain, he charged them not to relate what they had seen to anyone, except when the Son of Man had risen from the dead. So they kept the matter to themselves, questioning what rising from the dead meant. The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. So this is the Feast of the Transfiguration, and we always hear this reading on the second Sunday of Lent. The Transfiguration is described in Matthew, in Mark, and in Luke, and for lots of different reasons it's not found in John's Gospel. It's one more way that John's kind of out on his own. He's a maverick, I don't know what you say. But anyway, this isn't in John's Gospel. But it is in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Now, they all tell the same story, but there's certain things that are a little different in each one of their accounts. Jesus has begun this infamous journey to Jerusalem. And he's turned his back on the north. He's turned his face toward Jerusalem. He's starting to figure out what's going to be happening there to him. And he decides to go anyway. So on the way, he takes his 3 closest friends, Peter, James, and John, goes up to a mountain to pray so that to looking for the strength and the will to endure what awaits him in Jerusalem. Well, they're up there, and Mark describes some type of mystical or some type of ecstatic experience that Jesus has. And it's almost like the life and the power and the strength and the glory of God fills Jesus up, and his body is actually like transfigured or transformed. And his clothes, even his clothes, become dazzling white. And Mark says they were whiter than any fuller could bleach them. Fullers back then were people who bleached clothing. They used lye if they had it. It's what we use, that's why it's translated as bleach. But they would use bleach, lye, to make clothing white. So Mark says that's what happened to Jesus' clothing. Now, if that's not enough, all of a sudden, the 2 greatest people in the Old Testament appear. Elijah appears, and then Moses appeared. And they're both talking to Jesus, and Jesus is conversing with them. Well, at that point, Peter kind of blurts out something, kind of a little inadequate in the midst of this. He says, "Master, why don't we build 3 tents, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah?" It's like, where did that come from? But This is a little bit the way Peter is. So, if that's not enough, all of a sudden, a cloud comes in, and from the cloud, this is what we hear. This is my beloved Son, listen to him. Now, when I was reading it, I made a mistake. I said, you are my beloved Son. And then I said, listen to him. Okay, this is really, really important, because when Jesus was baptized in Mark's Gospel, God the Father says to Jesus, you are my beloved Son. In you I am well pleased. But no one else heard it in Mark's Gospel. This is the first time they hear God declaring Jesus his beloved Son. So this time, it's, this is my beloved Son. So they hear it. Okay, and then God says to the disciples, listen to him. Now that's interesting. When they look up, Elijah's gone and Moses is gone. Now remember, Elijah represents all the prophets and Moses represents the law. And God is saying to these three Jewish people, they're off the scene, listen to him. Okay, so what's happening here? Well, I think there's two major points to this gospel we just heard. The first is we're given the true identity of Jesus. He is God's beloved Son. He is God's Son. So that's the first part. That's what God says. The second part that God says is listen to him. Now, that would really be shocking for Jewish people back then, because they were supposed to be listening to the prophets and Elijah and the law and Moses. Now, God is not saying don't listen to them, but God is saying listen to my Son. He reveals me completely. He's the perfect revelation of who I am. The prophets and the law are not. Listen to him and listen to his interpretation of the law and the prophets. So the Transfiguration reveals who Jesus is, and we're told to listen to him. We're told to listen to him. Now, let's see how we can apply this in our lives. There are a lot of voices out there that we're tempted to listen to. There's a lot of voices out there that we're tempted to listen to. And we're told today to listen to the voice of Jesus. So, sometimes obedience is a virtue, but sometimes disobedience is a virtue. So this is what I would encourage you to do today and this week. Do not listen to those voices that are contrary to the gospel. Don't listen to those voices that are contrary to the gospel. Sometimes those voices are in our culture and in our society, and they take the form of values that we're supposed to live by. Some of them may be good, a lot of them are not. So be disobedient to those voices in our culture and in our society and in our media that undermine the gospel and that are contrary to the voice of God and to Jesus Christ. Sometimes the voices we need to not listen to are inside the church. Inside the church. I was down at Camilla Hall yesterday for the 10:30 Mass, and there was a little reading before the Mass by one of the sisters on one of the co-founders of the Immaculate Heart of Sisters, the Immaculate Heart of Mary Sisters, Sister Teresa Maxis, who was mixed race. She was black and white. And that caused a scandal in the church. And the hierarchy couldn't get their heads around it. And she was persecuted because of that. And she had to leave the convent for a while. And she was welcomed back when she was able to come back. So sometimes the voices that are contrary to the gospel are inside the church. But also, here's another place where those voices sometimes appear that we need to disobey. Sometimes those voices are within our own heads. And, it's easy to point our finger at society, and sometimes it's easy to point our fingers at the church, but sometimes we have to start with ourselves. And we listen to voices that lead us away from the gospel as well. So this week, I'm just going to encourage you not to listen to those voices that are contrary to the gospel. Thanks, everyone, and God bless.